The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
So let me turn to the sort of the electrifying issue, and that's this whole issue about birther. You and I have disagreed about this in the past, and I assume that Governor Romney has as well. What has brought this back up on the radar screen? This has been pretty silent for a while.
Well, it wasn't brought up by me. It was brought up by somebody releasing a statement from the 1990s by Barack Obama when he was not even thinking in terms of the presidency, and strongly stated that he was born in Kenya and that he was raised in Indonesia. So after that came out by Breitbart and some others who did actually a pretty good job on it, I must tell you, but when that came out, everybody started calling me, and I gave my 2 cents. I mean, I've always felt that there were a lot of holes in this whole situation, but he made that statement himself, and the publisher wrote it, and he wrote it down, and it was going to be part of a brochure to sell a book. That's a pretty strong statement. And that was made by somebody that wasn't running for president and probably had no intention of ever running for president. So I think it was probably a very honest statement.
All right. Well, as I've noted, you and I disagree about it, and recently there was a fuss about whether or not President Obama would be on the ballot, I think, in Arizona, and there was another sort of round that preceded this business about the brochure. And Hawaii apparently convinced Arizona, if Arizona had any doubt about it, at least the representative, that he was born in the United States. Are you still not satisfied? I mean, what is it that you want to be satisfied?
Well, look. It's not up to me. Has nothing to do with me. But the fact is, if he wasn't, he's not allowed to run for president. He's not allowed to be the president. So this is not up to me. This was something that came out last week. People called me about it. I gave my 2 cents. There's a lot of questions as to the authenticity of the birth certificate. So you can believe it or you don't have to believe it. But certainly there are many, many questions. You've had people on your show. You've heard people. There are many, many questions as to that. And we'll just have to see where all the chips fall. I can tell you that this is not an issue, despite what he says, that President Obama likes. This is hitting very close to home. This is not something that he enjoys. With all of that being said, I think it's much more important at this point to talk about what's going on with OPEC, what's going on with China, what's going on with virtually every country in the world that is just ripping the United States and making it to a point where we can, in many cases, not properly function. We have $16 trillion in debt, soon to be, and we have to do something about it. And I would much prefer, and you know this because I've told you this many times, I would much prefer discussing that than discussing anything else. And that's also my expertise.
But see, I think, though, that the campaign, the President Obama campaign, actually enjoys that this issue gets up and gets pinned to you.
I totally disagree with you. I think they hate the subject. Well,
I'll tell you why. Because they released a statement. Stephanie Cutter, who is the deputy campaign manager, just released a very strong statement referring to you as talking about disgraceful conspiracy theories, demonstrating your lack of moral leadership, calling you a charlatan, and pinning that to Governor Romney as though because you said it that it's pinned on Governor Romney because you hold the fundraiser.
Yeah, I totally disagree. I think they hate it. I think they don't like it at all. And what they're doing is saying we love it. And frankly, I think they hate this subject. And I actually sort of semi-know for a fact that they hate the subject. This is not a subject that they want brought. Now, in politics, as you know, you're talking about spin.
If they want to, if you think the more important job is OPEC and jobs and China, every single time we get sort of this distraction where we get into this sort of name calling on both sides, and I saw the fuss with Wolf Blitzer that you had on CNN. Every time we get into that, we're not talking about OPEC, we're not talking about jobs, we're not talking about China. We're doing all this name calling.
But that's because you and Wolf, whose ratings are just a tiny fraction of yours, you'll be happy to know, but that's because you and everybody want to bring this up. I don't bring it up. You didn't call me and you asked me if I do the show. I didn't ask you. And I said, yes, I would do the show. And frankly, if you would have not brought up the birth certificate or the place of birth, I wouldn't be discussing it with you. every time I speak to you or every time I speak to whoever, they bring it up. I would much prefer talking about jobs because I'm really good at that. I'd much prefer talking about the economy. I'd much prefer talking about other nations and what they're doing to us and how they're hurting us and how we can solve that problem. But in all fairness, Greta, you brought it up. I didn't bring it up.
Indeed, I brought it up. Indeed, I witnessed the sort of the showdown at the OK Corral you had with Wolf Blitzer. But it has also become a part of the campaign. If you've got the deputy campaign manager issuing a statement where now the Obama campaign is saying that Governor Romney lacks moral leadership in a statement, they're now using this whole birther controversy, which is electrifying to many people. They're now using that as a way to suggest that Governor Romney is somehow lacks any moral leadership.
By the way, electrifying both ways, because I will tell you, you have many, many, many people out there, millions and millions of people who totally agree with it. I mean, so you're not talking about electrifying one way, you're talking about both ways. Now,
I'm talking about both ways. I'm talking about both ways.
Yeah, it is both ways. The Obama people constantly refer to Senator McCain, who came out and strongly, did certain things. Well, unfortunately, that worked out very well for Obama, not very well for Senator McCain, unfortunately. And that's the way it is. And they said, well, why don't you do what Senator McCain did? Well, maybe people shouldn't do what Senator McCain did. But again, you asked me about this. I didn't ask you. And frankly, I would much prefer talking about what to do about lots of different places throughout the world that are taking advantage of the United States because we are not doing well as a country.
There is no question I brought it up. I don't dispute that. And you and I, of course, we disagree on this whole birther thing. But it's not exactly like, you don't bring it up. But I've got a tweet from today where you say Barack Obama is practically begging Mitt Romney to disavow this place of birth movement. He is afraid of it and for good reason. He keeps using Senator John McCain as an example. However, Senator John McCain lost the election. Don't let it happen again. So you yourself bring it up on your Twitter account. So it's not like all of a sudden I've imagined this and pulled it out of the air.
But that was in response to other reporters, Greta. I mean, other reporters are asking the same question. So I have a very large number of Twitter. My Twitter is very large.
It's millions. It's very large.
It's millions. And frankly, people ask me to discuss certain things. But in this case, the reporters bring it up all the time. So I was responding to reporters on Twitter.
All right. Okay. Well, and I was just sort of responding to the controversy because it is somehow morphed from an issue, morphed into a campaign strategy. A campaign strategy.
I actually think it's a very good issue for Mitt Romney. I actually do. Now, I may be different. And again, I'm not a politician. I'm somebody that's done very well in business. I understand what life is all about. I actually think it's a great issue for Mitt Romney, but he might not think that way, and we certainly can disagree on that. We don't even talk about that issue, by the way. We talk about jobs. We talk about lots of other things. One of the reasons I support him, I think he's a fine person who also understands China, understands OPEC, and understands what it's going to take to bring this country back. That's really what we talk about. We don't talk about this particular issue. I don't like to use the word birther because I think it's very condescending to a very important issue. But, I think it's a very condescending term to a really very important issue. But we don't talk about that.
All right. Well, what has happened it's sort of the campaign in many ways. We've got a lot of name-calling going back and forth. We've got George Will referring to you as a bloviating ignoramus.
Well, but I know George Will, and George Will is probably the most overrated political analyst there is. I mean, George Will is somebody that I have zero respect for. I don't think he's very smart. And, if you listen to George Will, this all started with him 6 months ago when he said the Republicans aren't going to win the election. And I took offense at that, and I disagree with that. And if you look at the polls, you can understand why I would do that, because the polls are doing very well, and they're looking very well. So, George Will is not very high on my list, and he understands that.
All right. Well, you've also you tweeted about him today and say he may be the dumbest political commentator of all time. But, it used to be that we said,
others.
All right,
he's right up there.
Actually, can I ask him, why do you pull Rosie back into this? You pulled Rosie back into this at one point. She wasn't even part of this.
Because she referred to me again. I only bring people when they go at me, I go at them. Rosie did something with me, so I did it again. Rosie likes to bring me up. She hasn't got her show. It failed due to very poor ratings. She's off the air. She's sort of in Never Neverland, and she continuously talks about me. So rather than just turning a cheek, which perhaps I should do, I, on occasion, will refer to her.
Well, she seems sort of almost this one sort of gratuitously. I mean, I'm not
No,
sure how Rosie got pulled into this one.
this was in reference. She said, "I only refer when they say something about me. I say something about this." This was in reference to what she said. This was not brought up by me.
All right,
by the
let's
way,
go back
Rosie
to
did start that whole thing. So,
this round.
She truly wishes. Just so you understand, she truly wishes she hadn't.
You know, I got so many notes in front of me, people going back and forth, calling each other names, whether it's getting called a charlatan, they're trying to pin it on Romney, this is the Obama campaign, George Will calling you a bloviating ignoramus, then you're calling someone a loser. It's sort of hard to keep track. It almost feels like we've really gotten off the off the issues about...
well, again, Greta, you continuously talk about this. You know, I thought we were going to be talking about the economy and jobs and other countries and what they're doing to us. And you just sort of like this subject. And, well, we talked about that for about, 20 seconds, and we talked about the rest of the entire show. But whatever is good for your show is good for me because I happen to think your show is terrific.
Well, all right, let me go back to the whole issue of jobs and the economy.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.